Rev up your engines! I got a 4-year-old Honda Civic with a whole bunch of engine lights on, but the main codes are all bank 1, sensor 1, oxygen sensor, which in this case is more than an oxygen sensor. It's an air-fuel ratio sensor. Being that it's an air-fuel ratio sensor, you don't want to mess around with putting an aftermarket Bosch, some cheaper one on. You want the OEM one, and they start at $242. So they're not cheap. There's other lights coming on. Warning lights. Says there's a brake hold system problem. Said there's a problem with the electronic power steering. Now when I check it with my relatively high level ANOVA scan tool, an all module scan, which we're gonna do right now, scan all modules, it checks absolutely everything. Let's see if all those problems, the other ones are ghost codes or whether they actually have data behind them. This is where an all module tester like this, you gotta have them if you're gonna work on these modern cars. There's just so much. Look at all the stuff it's got to go through. Now, while we're waiting for the scanner to go through, realize this car is running perfect, doesn't shake, gets great gas mileage, has no problems other than all these stupid lights and all these different warnings that keep popping up. It even says it's got emissions problems. Now, from my experience, having all those problems pop up at once, even the car runs okay, it's generally one of two things. They shorten the whole thing out and it's going gaga, which we're going to test. The other is the ECM. The main computer, the car's going bad and it just starts stripping codes like no tomorrow. All the module scans, it's got a bunch of the fuel injection codes, but as you can see, they're all for the air fuel sensor 1, bank 1. Every single one is an air fuel ratio 1, and they're all oxygen sensor, bank 1, sensor 1. All of these codes are for sensor 1, duct lean, because there's a range problem. These are all codes for the bank 1, sensor 1, oxygen sensor. What we're going to hope is all those other codes are ancillary codes that pop up, but let's look at them just to see what the data is. So let's look at the next one. ABS system has a code. ECM failure. Not what we want. It's saying the ECM system has a failure. So let's look at the rest of the data. We'll go back into the system, look for some more trouble codes. Okay, electronic power steering. Let's see what that code is. That is vehicle speed system malfunction. Now, per se, the vehicle speed system has nothing to do with the oxygen sensor, other than they all operate through the main computer, the ECM. Look at everything before we start condemning anything. So let's look at the rest. One for the ABS system, ECM failure. One for the electronic power steering, and that has VSA system malfunction. That's the vehicle stability assistance. That has to do with making it stable so it doesn't slide around, it stays stable, doesn't slide, doesn't slip. Got a whole bunch of theoretical problems here, and some of them say ECM. Now, if you get feedback, you can get weird stuff. So here's what we're going to try in this thing, and then we're going to road test it. Here's the oxygen sensor 1 here, and it's connected right here. So we're going to disconnect. We'll reset the codes to 0, then take it for a road test. And we'll hope that that is feeding back and causing all those other codes. Then the only code that's going to come out will be the oxygen sensor code. Since it's disconnected, it can't feed back and destroy other systems and give bad data. So we'll get the connector, open the clip and disconnect. Now they'll often stick, so if you get a good pair of pliers and squeeze them, get them apart usually then. They can be real stinkers. Now it's apart. So close the hood, go inside, we'll put the key on so the idiot lights are on, and now we can erase the codes. Clear all codes, erase DTCs. Complex codes, so what we have to do is we have to go to each one. We go to the ABS system, then we erase that. That's erased, so now we'll go to the other systems that had codes. Electronic power steering, erase the codes. The code is left as a fuel injection control module because it knows that it's not plugged in, so we expect that. What we're going to do now is start it up and take it for a road test. So far it doesn't look very good because even though I've erased the codes, it's still got these other stuff showing that there's a problem. We'll take it for a ride though. Now it's run perfectly fine. I mean, the steering seems perfectly fine, but it keeps tripping all these stupid codes. Now, it can't be that the oxygen sensor shorting out is tripping those other codes. because it's no longer connected to the system. So it can't affect those other systems. There's no wiring plugged into it. So if it's shorting out, it can't feed back and make these other systems go bad. So we still want to road test it to see exactly what kind of data we're going to get back after we erased everything. It's saying emissions problem and brake problems. Yet it's braking perfectly fine. It's steering perfectly fine, even though it says there's an electronic power steering system problem. We'll give it full power here and it's taking off perfectly fine. There's nothing wrong with the way it runs. So I'm leaning kind of towards ECM, computer failure, because this is a used car that was bought secondhand. Nobody knows what the history of it was. Maybe it was flooded, and I've seen that happen to cars. A year or more after they're flooded, they start having wacky problems. It turns out the computer got wet, and it took all that time for it to finally short some of the circuits out, and all this haywire nonsense comes out with all kinds of warning systems. Power steering, even though it works. Braking, even though it brakes. But see, there's a lot of interesting technology in this Honda. Put on the right turn signal, it shows you the right side of the car while you're going down the road. You know? Does a pretty good job, but I gotta admit, it'd drive me nuts if it was my car and you were seeing all the stability system problems and brakes and lights flashing all over the place. We're headed back. I'm gonna plug the oxygen sensor back in. I knew that wasn't the problem for creating the other problems. It could still be a problem, but I'm thinking it's the computer that's screwing the whole thing up. So we'll look at all the data when we get back. We're going to go to System Status, and we're going to do an all module scan. Remember, this is after I reset them all to 0, and the only thing that showed up was the oxygen sensor circuit not working because I had it unplugged. So here we go. We're going to scan the whole thing. Scan all modules. We'll see what data comes out. Now, like I said, I was hoping that after I reset it all, the other codes wouldn't come on because the oxygen sensor problem was feeding back into the other systems, but that can't be the case because all those systems still were showing they had a problem even though I reset them all. Since some of those codes even said ECM problem, it probably is the main computer starting to break down. But the data doesn't lie, so we're rescanning all the modules now. Okay, now it's done. That's all. Oxygen sensor, because we had it unplugged. That we expect. Let's look at the rest. The anti-lock brake system, okay? Still has the ECM failure, even though I reset the code. And as we scroll down, electronic power steering still has the problem with the VSA system malfunction, even though I reset it. And the ABS system still has the ECM failure code. And the electronic power steering still has the VSA system malfunction. And the ABS system still has ECM failure code. So sadly but truly, even though this car runs perfectly fine, all these crazy lights are coming on. And it does have 2 ECM codes. ECM failure, I'm assuming the ECM's bad. This car runs good enough, and it was bought used. You're looking at some pretty expensive repairs if you want to try that for a car that still runs perfectly fine. In this case, it's close to $1,000 job. Has to be replaced, has to be reprogrammed. But since the car runs perfectly fine, and this is Clarksville, Tennessee, where you don't get any emissions testing, so it doesn't matter that the check engine light is on. There's no test to get tested. Really, the owner doesn't want to spend $1,000 for a car they just recently bought used that runs okay. But what I'd worry about with this car is how much further stuff is going to go on. I would be worried that the computer will get worse as time goes on and break other things. You got to guess kind of a human analogy. It's like a stroke. If somebody has a stroke, they lose certain amount of abilities. Well, this has lost a certain amount of abilities, but it still runs good. Is it going to get worse over time or not? The only time's going to tell that. Still runs fine. It's smooth. It doesn't shake at all at idle. There's all these annoying lights coming on, and it keeps telling you problems with systems that otherwise seem to be working perfectly fine. So what did you learn today? Well, you learned that if you get a bunch of problems with the car and have one big code, disconnect that sensor and see what happens. In this case, it didn't fix our problem. The other codes, even after I erased them, came right back, showing that, no, that one sensor isn't the cause of all these other problems. It could be, because it could feed back to the computer system and cause that. But when you disconnect it, there's no feedback, and the other code still came in. So in this case, probably the main computer that's going bad, causing all these things, but it still runs good, and most people don't want to shell out $1,000 for a car that still is running perfectly fine. And it also shows us the modern cars have an awful lot of electronic crap on it that costs a fortune to fix when they break. All this stuff's gonna break down as they age. That's electronics. It's not like your cell phone that costs maybe $800. You get a new one every year or two. Cars cost a lot of money with all these electronics. There's a lot of crap that you'll probably live with when it starts to break down. So if you never want to miss another one of my new car repair videos, remember to ring that bell.